at the end of the day, it's really your beliefs about happiness that determine how happy you are, not so much the things that really happen to you.
Well, welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting, and you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 130, lucky number 7, and today's guest is Ash ElDifrawi. Ash is a cynical psychologist, a clinical psychologist turned marketing executive turned author of a book on happiness turned podcaster along with his son. Yeah, that's Ash in a nutshell. He is truly an incredible person. He has been CMO and marketing leader at companies ranging from Aspen Dental to Redbox to Gogo to Google and McKinsey. His fascinating book is called The 10 Worlds, The New Psychology of Happiness. And in this interview, we talk about what exactly is happiness, what are his top marketing lessons he's learned from his career there, and what is the deal with this crazy father-son podcast, Hold Me Back. It is Ash, and it is time to catch him. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Ash ElDifrawi, the clinical psychologist, marketing executive, the Renaissance man. It just goes on and on and on. Ash, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. That's an awesome intro. Renaissance man. I'll take it.
Of course. Well, thank you for sending me the script to read that off word for word. That was really nice of you.
Beautiful, man. Way to do it.
So this is really cool. We've been connected for a bit, and there's some really exciting news that you have in terms of a podcast that you are doing with your son that we will get to later. But before we get into that, I do want to get into your background, both in the worlds of psychology and marketing. To start us off there, you're a clinical psychologist, professional psychologist. What drew you to this world of psychology in the first place?
Yeah, so it's interesting, actually. It's kind of an interesting, somewhat elegant and serendipitous story. So when I was getting my doctorate, or actually doing my postdoctoral work, I was trying to figure out how to make some money on the side so I can, pay for my, ramen noodles and Kraft mac and cheese to survive. And so at the time, there was a lot of people in the research world, consumer research, that like to use psychologists to run focus groups. And I had a friend who was in that field, and he said, hey, make some extra money. These guys pay pretty well. So I started running some focus groups. And what I didn't sort of expect was how much I would be drawn to this kind of whole world. I guess you can call it consumer psychology. So I did these really cool projects where there's brand research about how to talk to consumers. It was all about, how to influence behavior. And at the end of the day, that's all psychology. How you think about product development, how do you think about advertising, how do you think about influencing customers and winning their hearts and minds. And so I found myself really getting drawn into this. And luckily enough, this person allowed me to do more and more, and not just be running the focus groups, but try to actually help them understand what the implications of it were. And I find that my mind started thinking more about this than than the family counseling I was doing, or the marriage counseling I was doing. I just found myself thinking, I'm going to try this, and I can always come back to clinical psychology. And then I was lucky enough to do this project with a company called McKinsey & Company, which is a very well-known management consulting firm.
Yeah, I was not exactly a brand new startup there.
Yeah. So, and I was sharing with one of the partners there that I was thinking of maybe going back getting my MBA, and they said, no, you have more degrees than a thermometer. You don't need another degree. Why don't you think about coming and applying at a management consulting firm like McKinsey? We hire a lot of what they call APDs, advanced professional degrees. It's not just for MBAs anymore. And so I thought, give it a shot. I applied and was lucky enough to get into McKinsey, and that sort of started me down this different career path.
What was your training like? What was the education side of things? I'd imagine that's not the quickest or easiest thing in the world.
Well, Max, there's a really funny story here because Actually, one of my closest friends at the time was actually a partner there, or associate partner there. And so I was asking, like, what's this like? I hear it's really intense, and the process to get in is, the odds are very small. And he says it's very case based. And I'm like, oh, a case? Like, what do you mean? Like a couple comes in with like marriage problems? It's like, no, dude, like, like Nike can't figure out how to make money. That's like a case like that. So I had to learn this whole way of thinking about cases, training for that. I realized at the end of the day, it's really about problem solving. How you take a look at a problem, how you disaggregate a problem, draw and chase it down to its parts. And so the training there was really about how to be a strategic thinker and an impact thinker and a problem solver, which has served me well my entire career. They did put you through a 3-week mini MBA, which was pretty intense. But I found myself, I remember in my first project, believe it or not, I look around the room and there was a MD, a couple of PhDs in physics, a chemist, and me, and there's like one MBA. So it
Oh
was,
my God.
I know, a couple lawyers, I think, too. So it was really interesting.
I thought you said NBA. I was like, oh my God, there's a professional basketball player there as well.
No, but they get those too. But no, it was great.
So that kind of combines the psych world and the business world there. And in your experience, a theme that you keep coming back to, and you've even written a book about, is happiness. And it's really, really, I think, no matter what is going on in the world, I think happiness is such an important thing. And it's a thing that so many people either strive for or strive to increase for themselves just because it's, such a good thing. Where did this fascination with happiness come from?
Started way back. And as you know, I've talked, this book has been a 23-year journey. So, my thinking about it and the world and the science behind it and the research on it has evolved significantly in terms of happiness. But if I had to say where it started, honestly, way back when I was in school and thinking about becoming a clinical psychologist, what drew me to it was just how bad people were being happy. Constantly hearing people talk about why they're struggling to be happy, why they're having a hard time overcoming issues, why they kept falling into the same patterns over and over again. And it occurred to me that we sort of exist to be happy. If you ask anybody like why they do something, and eventually if you keep chasing down that path, at the end of the day, it's going to be because they think it makes them happy. It can be diluted. It could be completely misguided. It's going to get there one way or the other. It occurred to me and my co-writer, if it's the core thing that we're all striving for, then maybe we could help people understand and break down what really gets in the way of that. What really keeps us from that. So that book was sort of the journey of us trying to help people understand all the ways in which we get happiness wrong. Is there a right way? And then help people sort of quantify that, or at least categorize that in some way. And that's what the book's about.
And it's the 10 worlds of happiness. So you've really done a deep dive. I mean, you mentioned this is like 23 years in the making. Shout out Michael Jordan there. You just can't get away from the Chicago ties.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I planned that one for a while. But what is something about happiness that many people would find surprising?
At the end of the day, it's really your beliefs about happiness that determine how happy you are, not so much the things that really happen to you. So let me maybe a simple example of that. And I hope this is not too pedantic or whatever, but just think about the fact that if you have two people who've had the exact same event happen to them, for some people, it might destroy them. So let's think about just somebody breaking up, getting dumped. I've seen it take people down this really dark path. They can't get over it. They think they can't be happy without this person. They go into depression. They don't get over it. It takes years. I mean, the repercussions for some people could be incredibly devastating. For somebody else, I've seen it actually be a learning experience for them, and they learn something about themselves. They change that, and they become more hardy and durable and smart and introspective, and get better and better at relationships because of it. Same event, exact same external event, very different impact on your happiness, which then tells you that your happiness is not contained within the things that happen to you. It's contained in terms of internally what that stirs up. We use the example. I love this analog or metaphor or imagery. The Buddhist world, they talk about like a glass of water, and that your life condition or sort of your psychological makeup, we use the word life condition, is sort of this glass of water. The sediment at the bottom is sort of your mood that can get stirred up or not stirred up. So for example, if you have a lot of stuff that you're holding on to, maybe let's say like it's insecurity or something like that. If some external event happens, like something stirs the water, if you have a lot of this stuff, this negative stuff, insecurity, whatever, the water gets really cloudy, and it could really bring you down. But if you don't have the sediment's not there, you can stir and stir and stir and stir, and nothing's going to happen because there's no crap to stir up. So it's not about the stirring is, the stir is the external event. The water is sort of your life condition, and but the stuff is what really matters. We call that stuff those are your beliefs that we talk about in this book. Depending on what that belief is, if it's a negative belief, you might stir up stuff that the water gets dark and cloudy. But if maybe it's something you have a positive belief that gets stirred up, the water, and it could be bright colors, like the water could get bright, sunny, shiny. So all that to say, it's a interesting metaphor for your happiness is contained whatever that stuff that's your beliefs inside of you, that sediment inside of you, not contained in the things that happen to you. And a lot of people have sort of conceptually had this idea before, but nobody has ever really tried to understand what those beliefs are specifically that are getting stirred up, quantify them, define them, scientifically support them, understand them at a neurological level, and then explain them to the world. And that's what we did in the book.
It's really cool that you did that deep dive. The analogy there, it's almost like taking the classic glass half full, half empty analogy and taking it to another level by adding all sorts of different stuff in there. It's a deeper look at it.
Yep.
You talk in the book about these 10 different worlds of happiness. I know you are from the world of tranquility. We don't need to go through all 10, obviously, but what comes to mind as maybe the most common world of happiness out there for the average person?
I actually think the world of tranquility is one of the most common ones particularly for people in my age range, the kind of the Gen Xers. The world of tranquility is really the belief that you kind of cling to in this world, which can serve you well, but a lot of times does not serve you well in terms of happiness. And it's the belief that happiness comes from avoiding pain. And by that, we don't mean physical pain. I mean, it's the world that you sort of believe that happiness can be achieved if you can avoid like negative outcomes. It's the world of sort of security, the world of peace of mind. And so you're seeking that out. And a lot of the ways people do that is by trying to not make bad decisions or negative outcomes. For me, I found it functioning in a lot of really negative ways and some positive ways as well, but negative ways in that I had this delusion, or I had this belief that like my happiness was contained in the decisions I make. Like, should I take this job, or things that were happening? I'm like, oh, what happens if my son doesn't get into this class, or should we spend this money? Like everything, there was so much pressure on me to get those right, because I was under this belief and this illusion that if I don't get it right, my happiness will get kind of taken away. And in fact, it's interesting. We talk in the book, there's a lot of research that shows that we're actually really bad at predicting what we think the outcome makes us happy. More often than not, it's actually not the outcome that makes us the most happy. So not only is it a delusion, it's also, it could serve you the opposite. I used to really be paralyzed with these decisions. I have a lot of anxiety. As you can imagine, if you believe your happiness is derived from peace of mind, to try to be chasing all the time, can you imagine just how often you're just going to not achieve that? And it's going to be a constant up and down ride. The other one that I think is really common for people, and everybody's going to relate to this, is the world of hunger, which is the belief that happiness comes from getting what you want. And it sounds really weird to say that, because of course happiness comes from getting what you want. But it's not, again, all this is to this, when you believe that your entirety of your happiness comes from achieving certain goals. And everybody knows this, and everybody enters the world of hunger and all the time. Doesn't mean you live there. I mean, but the people who live there, it's like, if I could only get this, I could be happy. If I only get this promotion, if I could only get the girl, if I could only get that car, if I could only, and what you start realizing is obviously this is a bit of a hamster wheel. It's like chewing a stick of gum. Like you're sweet at first, but it always fades. So you find yourself having to chase the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And it's the belief that you have to get that thing. If only, I could do this, I could be happy. But it doesn't last. And what if you don't get it? Does that mean you can't be happy? But that's a world we all sort of get into and enter every now and then. And it's okay, because it makes people achieve certain things. But when you attach your happiness to it, it starts becoming pretty obvious why these beliefs can lead to temporary happiness, but they're not going to lead you to a happiness that's really hardy or lasts or could endure anything. It's going to be subject to fate and luck and all kinds of things that happen to you you just can't control.
I think that can hit really close to home for so many, because I think you hear more and more these days about people really embracing the journey. And whether you're an entrepreneur or you're just somebody who's really ambitious about their career and kind of getting to the next level, enjoying the journey is such a big part of it, because as you're saying, that happiness when you achieve a certain goal is temporary. It does fade off over time. And if you are able to do something and choose a path where you are appreciative and enjoying your stops along the way, and just kind of the everyday grind, you get something out of it, that can bode so much better than kind of just waiting your whole life for like one big moment to pay off.
Yep, it's true. And people call it enjoying the journey, but I think Alex, my co-writer, and I would probably think about that more as your happiness is not so dependent on like an outcome. You're deriving happiness from so many other things, and you enjoy the journey. And you like it, and the outcome is great, and it's okay to be happy. And it's just how much of your happiness is dependent on that is really the difference
Mm.
between sort of being in a world takes you toward a really challenging place versus a healthy balance.
So you have such an extensive background in the psychology space and different studies of just how things work, including obviously happiness. We've barely talked about marketing so far, which I think is so cool because there's so many different aspects of your background. Anybody who comes across your background, I think, would be blown away by all the success you've had in your career. And you've been CMO or senior marketing, senior positions at some of the biggest companies out there. Just to name off a few: Aspen Dental, Redbox, Gogo. Been advising to Shutterfly. You've also had stops at Google along the way, Wrigley. I'm just going to go on and on and on just to, blow smoke. No, I'm just kidding. But you've had an incredibly successful marketing career, and yet you have that background in psychology as well. When did you make that jump and realize that, not only is this psych background relevant to the business world, there's something about marketing in particular that I could have a real successful business career using some of what I know from that psych space?
Yeah, I think that probably started at McKinsey when I started piecing all this together because it was my first exposure to applying any knowledge I had right into solving a business problem. I started realizing that I was bringing that arsenal, particularly to marketing. Right, I just started realizing that part of psychology, consumer psychology, understanding how to get inside the hearts and minds of consumers and impact and influence them. Obviously, marketing seemed like the natural home to that or product development or how to think or innovation. So that was really the world that I started getting drawn to, more so than purely sort of financial or supply chain or any of the other sort of aspects. It just felt like that was the right place. So I started going to and branding in particular. My world started really in the world of branding when I think branding was in its heyday. Right? I think branding plays a very different role now in the world, but back then it was really about how to build a great brand, and a lot of that was how to build capture the hearts and minds of consumers. Back then, it wasn't as much around, honestly, your product as it was around the brand you built around your product. I think the world has fundamentally changed completely from a marketing perspective. But back then, it just made a lot of sense. And so I went to Wrigley at the time because that was all about sort of the brands, right? At the end of the day, it's gum, but people still see these brands. People know them all their lives, right? And then of course at that point I started becoming much more of a business owner and a commercial leader, and realizing that it's much more than about building a brand. It's how you think about building a business, winning with consumers, and it sort of took off from there.
It certainly did. And so what are some key marketing lessons that you've learned along the way that you think are relevant to any marketer today, regardless of what they're doing?
So I have like a few different sort of philosophies around this. I think there's one that sort of rises to the top, where I say that your product is your brand. By product, by the way, that's a general term that can mean anything that you're selling or charging for. It could be service, it could be some kind of customer experience. It doesn't have to be a physical like product, like a phone or a car or something like that. But I think that the reason that's become the law of the jungle is because the consumers sort of own it now. One of my favorite expressions by a guy named Marty Neumeyer. He said it a long time ago, I think before the world understood what he was saying. He said, your brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. And if you don't believe that, be honest with yourself and say, when is the last time you bought a 1.5 rated product on Amazon?
It's so true.
So if you don't believe that your product is your brand, so like, even if it's you would sooner buy a 5-star, 4.5-star rated product that you haven't really heard of the brand before you'd buy a 1.5-star product from like somebody, a household name. 9 out of 10 times.
And when you think about the word of mouth component, how strong it is when you get a referral from somebody or you hear about somebody else from somebody that you trust. I don't know what the stats are. I'll call it 99 out of 100 times you're going to go with working with that person or buying that product compared to something that you don't know anything about.
So yeah, there's lots of statistics around right now when you survey consumers and you ask them, where did you hear about the product or what's the most important aspect of your decision? And they heard it from a friend or social media has skyrocketed to the number one reason, where just 10 years ago might have been like less than a single digit. And that's, the explosion of social media and all these stuff and all these platforms and review sites and all this stuff. There's a gazillion reasons why people now trust all these different sources and there's places to go. And that just makes the point stronger. Like, because again, you can put fancy advertising and you could do all you want and make a beautiful looking product and a great ad and spend a shit ton of money, but you can't polish a turd. Excuse my language.
No, I'm cracking up because you just said shit and then you said turd and then you apologize for turd.
Yeah, my wife hates that expression, but I love
it's okay.
It. So, no matter what you do, and I learned that lesson at a couple of companies I was at. One company I was in, Gogo, which is just in-flight internet. And at one point, we created so much demand that we just didn't have the bandwidth on the planes to service everybody. So it was a real struggle because it's slow upgrade paths and it's hard. You gotta get stuff on a plane, and consumers didn't care. They didn't care that this was like the single hardest thing somebody could do. And that it was a miracle of science that this even happened at all.
Yeah.
And they loved it for all of 6 months. And then when it started getting slower, suddenly I was the devil. Like it was like the hardest thing ever because the people were pissed. So I went from loving the brand to having one of the hardest brand challenges I've ever had because the product experience just changed. It was just slow and expensive. And it was expensive only because I had to raise the price to try to keep people from using it. So I had enough bandwidth. Everything we did made sense. And the company wasn't making money. So it wasn't like they were sitting there taking all this money and laughing. It was a company that was investing to try to get it to work, not making any money, trying to be good to the consumer. But the consumer still was angry and not happy because the product just wasn't delivering. And so no matter what we advertised, no matter how much people initially loved it, no matter, if they dug, they'd see how much the company was investing in it versus taking profits and running with it. We're doing everything right, but our customer satisfaction scores plummeted. Why? Because the product is your brand. And if your product's not there, it doesn't matter how great your social media is, or how good your advertising is. None of that matters. They don't give a shit.
Excuse your language.
Yeah, excuse my language. Yeah. It's one of the reasons as a marketer, I probably won't take a marketing job if I don't run or own or manage the product organization or the customer experience organization. I've made that very clear to every last 12 years of my career. I'm not going to be a brand guy because your product is your brand. If you want me to build a great brand, you have to get a customer experience. And if you think about companies that have built great businesses, it's not because of their advertising. Uber didn't build their business because of their advertising, or DoorDash didn't build their business because of their advertising, or even Amazon. Like none of these guys, they didn't do it with great advertising. They did it with great focus on customer and customer experience and solved the real customer problem. And then the customers did the rest for them, right? The customer did the rest. And so if you want to build a great brand, build a great product, focus on the customer, and the customers will then do the work for you in terms of building a great brand.
Yeah, that's a really, really a fantastic lesson. I think back to where I've seen this come up in my own life. And it's so funny. Like, let's take, for example, if Spotify's down, if Instagram's down. These are platforms that I absolutely love and I'm on quite a bit and have really they're amazing platforms and they work 99.9% of the time. But the 0.0001% of the time that they're not working, everyone is furious, including myself. And like, I'm scrolling through Twitter, like, oh my God, is Spotify down? Is Instagram down? To your point, as much as you love a brand, if that product is not working, 24/7 or when you need it, it just makes you unhappy. And so there's so much focus on product and making sure that you're keeping it run smoothly.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's even a whole different issue in terms of the customer expectations now, which is why this is really hard. I mean, I mean, we used to get really mad when I was at Gogo because my intrinsic piece of me is like my human piece of me. Like I'm a person. I care about this stuff. I really care about the product. And then people go from like loving it to hating it. There was actually a really funny, very famous, funny skit by Louis C.K. where he talks about this very specifically. And he actually funny because he actually used this example of in-flight internet where the guy gets on it, discovers it, like, holy cow, I didn't know this existed. He discovers it, gets on, and then like it conks out and he's fucking pissed off. This guy is like the world, how he believes the world owes him something that he didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago. So it's like he didn't know it existed. He discovers it, he uses it, and now he's pissed off because it's not working perfectly.
Right. It's like something that involves satellites flying around.
Yeah. He's like, this is the most amazing. You're sitting in a chair at 10,000 feet, flying in the air, and you have internet in your lap. Yet you are now pissed off that it conked out for 5 minutes. And I think it's just a good analog to it's just the world we live in, right? What we come to expect is unbelievable now. It's great. I mean, it means that technology is moving at the speed of light, and that's my second big lesson to my teams. Like when I've taken on new marketing organizations, the first one is your product is your brand. It's just my religion. The second one is around how quickly context is changing. I basically say that marketing is sort of not changing at the rate of Moore's law. It's happening. Things are evolving and happening and being disrupted at such a strong rate that you can't sit there and go through like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year strategic planning cycles. Those days are over. I mean, you could be out of business in a year if you don't, adapt quicker than that in a lot of instances. It's just the barriers to entry for so many things has crumbled that the way we've historically sort of thought about, barriers to entry and this, it's just archaic at this point. I mean, look, there's still some industries where that might be the case, but they're a fraction of how many they were before, right? Like, yes, not everybody can come and build airplanes tomorrow. Like anybody can open an e-commerce site, right? Anybody. And supply chains have gotten to the point where you can even manufacture stuff unbelievably easily now that you probably couldn't before. You can make furniture, you can make gadgets, you can make electronic stuff, you can make an iPad. Like you can make almost anything fast, cheap, and pretty good quality. And if you have money and you don't have to make money immediately, you can like attack anybody and still share from them and create a real pain in the ass for like anybody who's an incumbent in the industry. And there's plenty of money, private equity guys or whatever out there right now that will do that. I mean, there's this whole thing of unicorns, right? There's billion-dollar companies that don't make money. And there's like a bunch of them. The joke is it's not really a unicorn anymore, right? It's sort of like a small horse at this point.
Right. I was interested to see where you're going there.
Yeah. You have to wake up every day with the paranoia that you could be put out of business with one click. And that's the sort of urgency you have to approach things in terms of how to think about consumers. And when I was at Redbox, I mean, think about it. Like when the business started, they put Blockbuster out of business, right? And then sort of Netflix and streaming threatens to put them out of business, and the whole industry sort of changed, and Disney Plus comes along and threatens that, and all these guys launch streaming services, and now that industry, like literally every 6 months, we face some kind of existential challenge. Sometimes companies go a decade without it. It used to be that they could go a decade or longer without an existential challenge. Now you're lucky if you go like 1 quarter without an existential challenge. And so it's a different world, and you have to be able to be, adapt or die. And if companies aren't ready to be that nimble and flexible and thoughtful, it's just not going to end well.
It's not. It's crazy how much stuff moves faster and seemingly faster and faster and changes more and more. Speaking of more and more, just to get a little definition here. What is Moore's law? Because I always forget that one.
Sorry. Moore's law was created, processing speed, that it doubles, like the processing speed doubles every year or 2 years. I don't remember the exact
Oh, yeah. Like computers, right?
Yeah. Computer processing speed. Yeah. It accelerates at this exponential rate. The amount of time it takes for processing power to double, like continuously like that speed of that increases. And so it might have taken 10 years before for it to double. Now it's 5 years and 2 years. Like it's this exponential rate of things changing. It was applied to processing speed. But I'm saying that now can apply to things that people historically have thought can never change so quickly.
Right.
Like the context of your business. Like I don't have to worry. If I create a barrier to entry, at least I'm safe for like, hey, a few years now, maybe.
Maybe like a couple days at this point.
Yeah, a couple days. Like what? Somebody opened, like really? Like somebody opened a site that sells this now? When I wasn't here. That wasn't here yesterday. And they're bidding on my keywords. That much money, really? What the hell is going on? So it's fun. It's exciting. But it also means that marketers have to think very differently about marketing. And it's been a challenge for me sometimes now hiring marketers to try to help them unlearn as much as they're learning. That's been a challenge.
What do you mean by that?
A lot of times marketers, they have a hammer so everything becomes a nail. Like, here's what I have in my toolkit. It's a media thing, or I need to, this more. It's a brand. I have to rechange my positioning or my architecture, my brand, or I need to think about my media mix, or, all this kind of stuff where what's starting to happen is because your product is your brand and because the battleground has sort of shifted towards customer experience and product, your answer might not be a marketing answer to your problem. Historically, what might have been an answer to your media, your brand, or get the right endorsement or sponsor, whatever it is, it now might become a product development problem. It might become an innovation problem. It might be a consumer positioning problem. It might be something very different. Marketers have to be able to think more and more like business owners than just kind of marketers as this function. So for me, I think I was really lucky because I was never a classically trained marketer. Like I didn't go through this path of like associate brand manager, senior brand manager, brand market.
That was you started saying my path before I totally changed things up.
Yeah, that was the path. And so I was lucky because I started as a consultant. And so my DNA was created more of a, how do you solve this problem? And not from any functional lens or not from any particular, not even from a industry or vertical lens. Because McKinsey is phenomenal. Like, how do you bring best practices and get all that and apply it and from everywhere, right? The brilliance of the firm was like, how do you harness that knowledge and apply it in this very powerful way? That's how I sort of approach things. When I see a problem that we're solving as a business, I don't think about it necessarily first as a marketer. I think about it in terms of like a problem. And then you go through that whole, what problem are you trying to solve? And then you figure out what levers if I have those levers, then am I turning the levers and dials, right? Am I turning the dials of those the right way, or what do I have to do? And so one of the things is, if you ever, worked for my organizations, they've heard me use the word levers a lot. Like, what levers do we have to move the business? Or what levers do we have to respond to attacks? And because you're starting to find out you don't have as much time. So if you don't have the levers sort of built or anticipated, you might not be able to respond in time. But a lot of times those levers are not marketing levers, right? It could be supply chain. It could be innovation. It could be product management. It could be build something. It could be a feature that you need. It could be whatever that you need. And a lot of times it is a marketing issue and the right segmentation, the right channels, and you introduce your mix, and people aren't responding in certain ways or channels that traditionally would. And you fix that. That's what I mean when I say sometimes I have to help them, like, forget about the levers, forget about those 3 or 4 or 5 things you have in your toolkit. Like, we need to think about this differently. That's what I mean by helping them unlearn.
We have levers, we have dials, we have hammers, we have nail. There's a whole toolkit, and that it's a constantly evolving toolkit. I think the analogy is a great way to think about it. If you would like one of your levers or dials or, whatever, hammer, nail in the toolkit, whatever you want to call it, if you would like one of those things to be a podcast, hit me up. You can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. I will help you bring it to life and save time with your high-quality podcast. Speaking of podcasts, let's hear something pretty cool that Ash and his son Aiden are doing in the podcasting world. If you look across different generations, there's just different things that are going on when you're raised. There's different beliefs you have. There's some differences between generations, but there's also some things in common. And you and your son Aiden have put together a phenomenal podcast, Hold Me Back, which is really, really cool because it involves both of you going through some of the biggest topics and things that are going on, but also just historically things that are maybe a little taboo to dive into. And it's really, really neat to hear what you disagree on, but also what you do agree on, and just embarrassing stories about each other as well. So yeah. Congrats on the podcast, Hold Me Back. Where did the idea for doing a podcast with your son come about?
Look, we have a really good open dialogue policy in this household where we allow our kids to talk about anything or ask questions, and and try to form a very healthy dialogue with them. It just is in a world that's becoming sort of very transparent, right? It's like, I think it's really important to let your kids feel that they can talk, because you can't control what they see and don't see anymore. You just can't. And so we just find ourselves having lots of conversations around just things that he believes that our generation just sort of not getting. And because of that, there's this gaps in, like, whether it's parenting or education or belief systems. We find that it looks like it's like getting worse and worse. Like the harmony between generations is getting wider and wider and wider. And we started asking ourselves why that's the case. And it was been interesting to kind of discover what we think the root causes of that are. So we said, why don't we explore that concept in a podcast? And I think he genuinely believed that it's actually is holding back that generation, and it's causing this belief that the Gen Z is going to have to sort of eviscerate this belief systems from boomers and Gen Xers before they can correct the trajectory of the world.
Thank you for leaving the millennials out of it, by the way.
Yeah,
on behalf of
millennials.
millennials.
Millennials are sort of caught in the middle, and they're just a bunch of self-serving assholes. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they're the worst.
No. I think millennials and Gen Z, I think it's actually, there's a lot of similarities there. But the reality is, if you think about it, I think the internet, social media has actually created this divide. And that sounds like a really simplistic thing to say, but it's actually not. I mean, like, you can argue that there's finally something that sort of has come along that has changed the social dynamics in the social world, the world, so much that you just can't ignore that it's having significant kind of psychosocial impacts on the world and how we're interacting.
Oh, yeah.
And because of that, what you're seeing is a different dynamic exists in the world that's allowing individual voices and beliefs to sort of be out there in a very different way, that we might have sort of lost sense of why these things were created in the first place. I think one of the things Aiden talks about is, like, a lot of these rights that we have in the Constitution or whatever, individual right, were not created as individual freedoms. They were created as individual freedoms to protect for the purpose of the greater good and greater whole. But that's actually been completely changed now, that most people are actually waiving these as their own individual freedoms for their own individual good, and not for the good of many. So, like, I think that you can make this really bold argument that where we are, given the existence of where we are now from a social internet, social media world, that maybe we would have actually rethought these our rights. And do you sort of need a Constitution 2.0 to really adjust to this? That's the kind of the bold statement to say, like, is Gen Z basically saying, yeah, we need to rethink this whole thing. And and what's holding us back is that your generation's holding on to convention and belief systems that need to just kind of go away. And only when they go away are we going to be able to sort of now create a world with a lot more harmony, a lot more, all the goodness, rather than, and still hang on to all the great stuff, but like do it in a way that's going to create, a better world. And I think that you could make a legitimate argument that is holding back Generation Z. And if you start, by the way, all the stuff you're reading now, all the stuff is, it's Gen Z's time. You're hearing all this stuff from Gen Z saying, we need to step in, or it's our time, and about it, whether it's about equality, whether it's about trust in society. It seems like it's just the divisiveness is growing. And so all that is sort of threw this in the head and said, maybe that we can actually model a healthy dialogue between our generations to negotiate a new contract. You have to think about parenting differently. You have to think about education differently. You have to think about social media differently. You have to think about sex differently. You have to think about everything differently, because we live in a different world. You live in a G-rated world. You grew up in a G-rated world. I'm growing up in an R-rated world. You had access to nothing. I have access to everything. So don't deny the fact that this is a different paradigm, and maybe you need to revisit all your beliefs. Just like I just said, marketers have to rethink everything. He's basically saying, I think your generation has to rethink everything. That's what the spirit of this is. And I found that very fascinating and very worthy of at least trying a podcast on it.
Absolutely. And you're doing more than trying. And I think it's so cool that you have these open conversations within your household in the first place, and then that you've taken them to a public forum and created something that's really, really cool, and that is interesting to listen to no matter what generation you're in, because it's really interesting to hear the dynamic there, as well as the topics you choose. What is a topic that you've either recorded already or you're going to record at some point that you're really excited about?
Well, the one that we did, which was fun, I'll give you a fun one, was the one on swearing, whether or not we should really care about swearing as much anymore. That was brought out by the fact that we've been hearing him swearing a little bit more, and we were a little concerned, and then we had an interesting debate around it. And actually, it's really interesting because there's a lot of research on it that we cited and talked through, and it was a really interesting discussion of how do we negotiate a new rule around kind of swearing around the house.
Yeah, the swearing is an amazing episode. One of my favorites as well. I think it's so fun what you're doing. So just congrats on the podcast again, and really excited to hear more and more episodes. Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shoutout of the Week.
The Wild Business Shoutout of the Week.
Wild Business Shoutout of the Week. I'm a big fan of the delayed laugh. Wild Business Shoutout of the Week. This is where we talk about a campaign or brand that caught our attention doing something really breakthrough. And you and your son Aiden have a unique perspective on Tesla. What do you have to share there?
Well, it's really interesting. My son loves Tesla, and obviously he loves Musk, and they're sort of tied together. What I really think it's interesting is it's his favorite brand, and he has never experienced the product, and he can't buy it, and he's not in the market for it. So he's not even any close to being able to be even in the world of owning that product. And I don't think I've ever heard of, or I don't think I experienced very much, somebody whose favorite brand is something that they don't experience, use, even aspire to have in the near term.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loves it, which means that a brand has done something very rare, but everybody wants to do is to stand for something much sort of bigger in people's minds and hearts than the product itself. It's sort of like, in some ways it flies in the face of your product is your brand. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe Elon Musk is the product in that particular case, perhaps. But they do such an amazing job of standing for something that his generation or he believes in, in terms of innovation and challenging the status quo and being bold and sticking it to the man and flicking their finger at a convention. I think in a lot of ways they stand for, Tesla or Elon Musk stand for something that the generation is sort of feeling. So I think it's really amazing that a brand could do that.
Yeah, it is. You don't see many brands like that. Obviously, so much goes back to Elon, but I think there's something about his giant, literally out of this world ideas when you talk about wanting to colonize, travel to Mars, and digging up underground for Hyperloop, and he's got his old flamethrowers. There's so much there that it just excites people. And hey, if he's thinking this way, maybe I can have some crazy ambition as well. And so I think there's just something about him, as wild as some of his stuff is. I think there's just something people relate to, and that ties back to his brand. So let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Yep.
All right, let's get wild. What is your favorite hobby?
Basketball.
Great sport. What is your favorite part about living in Chicago?
The lakefront and the fact that it's an incredibly livable city for such a big city.
Absolutely. And then what is your biggest pet peeve?
Loud gum chewing.
Oh, good thing I was not chewing gum throughout this interview. Well, Ash, thank you so much. This has been great. So cool hearing about your different worlds, your 10 worlds, your thoughts about things that are out of this world and beyond. Thank you for joining. Where is the best place to connect with you, to connect with Hold Me Back, and anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, for the podcast, it's holdmeback.com. You can go visit that. And then for the book, it's the10worlds.com. And actually, you can go there and take a little quiz to find out what world you're from. So it's pretty cool.
Perfect. And I am from Mars. And then final thoughts here. Stage is yours. It could be a quote. It could be a line, whatever you want. Send us off here.
Your product is your brand.
Your product is your brand. Or as I like to say, your product is your Branstetter. Thank you so much, Ash, for sharing your stories, your amazing insights from the 10 plus worlds of everything that you've done in your career. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. Make sure to follow Hold Me Back on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It is truly a thought-provoking, very, very cool podcast. Personally, the episode on youth sports just kind of choked me up a bit. It took me back. And if you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also find us and see what I'm listening to on Good Pods. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!